All right. So thank you all for being here this evening. I hope you all have gotten a chance to get your book. Mine just came in the mail. So I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but Kat has done us all a great service of writing down a lot of the things that she's been practicing and thinking about for a very long time. So we're really happy to have her with us this evening. Yeah, Kat, do you want to tell us about yourself?
Sure. I am residing on Monacan land in Charlottesville. They're unceded territory, and they're a very, very vibrant tribe, and it's that nation, and it's just always wonderful to remember that so many times we talk about these peoples in the past, and they're just so vibrant and thriving and very active. So I'm really excited to have worked with them on the statue removal. Still kind of wondering Sacagawea is family. So just wanted to say that, and how aligned and alive this work has been here. And so you'll hear about me kind of for the next hour and a half. I love to tell stories. I've been a clinician for 30 years. I've been a rural clinician. I've worked for eggs in bales of hay for many years, and have really tried on a variety of forms of herbalism, just for really looking at different systems and understanding that. I am a PA. I was trained as a physician assistant. So I'm a recovering scientist. I totally dig science, and I love how science articulates spirit. I think the constituents, the fractals, I think this is spirit language. So when I teach clinical herbalism, I don't separate spirit from science. I really think that the analogs and all the chemistry is still part of that deep language of the plants. So there really isn't a separation, and I love to teach. And, I'll talk a little bit more about the book once I start. But one thing I do want to say is, I invite everyone, I loan the book a lot because, I loan it to libraries. I've given it to different places. And sometimes if people have a short amount of time with it, I say, read the intro, read chapter 3, and read the epilogue. And we're going to talk about chapter 3, but the intro, in some ways, I wanted it to be the first chapter. And it's my story of indigeneity. And I think today in herbalism, that's such a really important point of healing of, we're watching so much polarization in so many realms. And, I feel our work as plant people is to really heal that torn fabrics. And how do we do that? So the introduction is, my story of indigeneity, returning to Ireland, looking at the Celts, my own process of dealing with my racism, how I have evolved and what I've seen. And then where I really feel it's such an open invitation for all peoples, all colors, gender, this is our medicine. And so I just love the first chapter because it's very personal. I feel it's very personal. So I'll talk more as I go through the slides, because as I say, story is herbal medicine. I can read Materia Medica and I can go back and reread it. But when I hear a story about blue vervain and interacting with this person's life, that herb is in my heart. I might forget even not factoids, but so I'm a profound believer in the story and teaching. So I don't have a whole lot of time tonight, but we'll fit in definite stories. So if it does stay this nice, small, intimate group, then if there is a question, I invite people either to put a question in the chat or we can keep it lively. I just ask that you introduce yourself. Anything else there? You know, I will say you just let me know when you want me to share the screen and we can start. But this is such an honor because I've been watching Foxhaven Farm. I just think y'all are badasses, and like I've just been watching what you all are doing. So being involved with you all, I learned so much, even though sometimes I may not be able to show up. So Lacey's going to talk a little bit about those projects with the herb growers. But just this is such an honor to, you know, whatever donation was raised tonight, it's just multiplies, it's exponential. It's just about really spreading those seeds. So let me go and start here. Now, can everybody see the slides? I can't see the chat. So if somebody wants to let us know if you can't see them. All right, Lacey, if you want to introduce what we're looking at.
Absolutely, yes. So Kat and I kind of met a second time, I guess, but met more intimately through this group that we started through Foxhaven, and a couple other farms wanted to start this group. And we just recently decided on a name, Herb Craft. So Craft stands for Chesapeake Region, well, it's new, so hold on a second. Chesapeake Region Association of Apothecary Farm Trailblazers. Well, it's a mouthful. But the reason that we chose that, and the reason that we're talking about trailblazing, is because this group that is coming together is apothecaries, and it's farmers, and it's folks that are, you know, making herbal products. And we're all trying to envision a system in which those herbs kind of stay locally and get used locally, and local folks have access to the herbs that are growing near them, and trying to figure out, like, how do we do that? Because that's not something that we have right now. A lot of our herbs are coming from outside of the United States, or just different parts of the country. And so really trying to find a way to support each other. And so some of the folks sent in their logos. We have, I think, 25 farms and close to 40 apothecaries. And that includes Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Maryland, and DC. So those are kind of the folks that are gathering. So if you know folks that are growing and or buying herbs, that want to be part of our collaboration and chats, do reach out and let us know.
Great, Lacey. Alex, did you want to add anything, or?
No, I think that covers it. I mean, it seems like we're still in the beginnings of these discussions, but it's just great to have resources. And I think that there will be some tours and things like that, so people will get a chance to meet each other and in real life, because right now it's all on Zoom since we're all spread out. Yeah. Very cool.
Great, Alex. Yeah, you know, I always look at these gatherings and this vision as the 100-year cycle. And so many times we gather in groups, and, you know, the energy in some ways dissipates. And but one thing I will say, in the meetings that I have shown up, there's this incredibly gentle ferocity of spirit by Alex and Lacey and the other farmers and growers. And, you know, this really is the long vision. You know, this may not materialize in the way that we're hoping in 10, 20 years. And also this is how it has to be. And so how brilliant that you all are holding this model before we're in the absolute have to phase. So it's about setting the groundwork and knowing our people and getting all that mycelial communication going, and so that we're there to tend and hold and really bring in that foundation. So kind of getting chills, so I better move on, or I'll just, but again, thank you for that. So let's see. Okay, so like I said, I'm from Charlottesville, and I want to begin by really honoring wherever you are, and whose ever territory that was. And so for me, even before the Monacan, this was the home of the chestnut and the ancient beech. And, those ancestors, it's that unceded territory of those beings that we have come to adore and revere and use as medicine. So, really understanding that my teacher is Choctaw. And so she has really deepened my understanding of what that word kin really means. And so it is in the mythology when we say our ancestors, these trees and plants, our bones are calcium, our muscles are sinew. We are made of these beings and earth material. So that's one of the reasons why herbal medicine is so incredibly resonant in our bodies. I take a alpha tocopherol, a vitamin A, and it's got to go to my liver, and I've got to break it down, and the body's got to recognize it. And then we drink a cup of rich nettles infusion. And if you've done that or taking herbs, your body just gives this huge release and this relax and this, it receives it because there's this immediate recognition. It's when you walk into a group that you're very familiar with and you can relax and you don't have to be on guard in a way. And that's, for me, how plants work. And so, they're so incredibly generous. Everything that how we've been behaving and how we've been interacting with them, you'd think they would up and leave, but they stay, and they just seem to be incredibly generous. So I just really want to honor all of the nations, plant nations, fungi, the rock, all of those medicines. This is from the book Energetic Herbalism. Not only is born the tested time, it is the most ecological system of medicine in existence today. And we're going to see why that is. It's very, very low on the consumer. We're trying to take in as little plant material as possible. And so when we learn to read our energetic landscape, when we learn to read our terrain, instead of just kind of tossing herbs that, well, let me put elderberry on it, let me put echinacea on it. When we learn the energetics, we can say, oh, it's hot, I need cooling herbs. Oh, I may not have golden seal, that's endangered, let me use self-heal, let me use another cooling herb. So we begin to understand the language of energetics, and then we look at, well, what do I have in my yard? What's growing in my garden? Medicine of place. This is, I think, my favorite chapter in the book. I'm going to give a little plug. I was just on the phone with Erica Galanton today. We're planning a Beltane weekend at the Ohio United Plant Savers Sanctuary. And it's about medicine of place. And we hear about reciprocity. We hear about giving thanks and all of that. But this is nourishing spirits. I mean, we go and we nourish, and that's what we're going to do this weekend. Even a beautiful place like the sanctuary that's all about preserving. You go on plant walks and you're still taking. It's like, oh, what's this used for? How do I work with this? We're taking information. So this weekend, what we're going to focus on is that whole practice of feeding the spirits of the sanctuary, feeding. We're not going to take anything. And in fact, Erica is this amazing creatrix of alchemy, and she does hydrosols and essences. And so what we're going to do is we're going to distill a medicine, an essence of the place. And, we're going to give that back. So medicine of place, I just want to say this. For me, the alchemy begins from the land where we harvest. And so if I come upon a field, I sort of want to vibe. I want to know, well, what was going on in that field? Because oftentimes, and I say this, we're here in Virginia and even in Maryland, and, where all of us are living, the Civil War was, most land was replete with so many battles and war and the enslavement, and all of this is living in the land. And so what happens is, as herbalists, as plant people, we start reading, wow, there's this huge field of yarrow. And instead of it maybe being for me, as we look at the history, we understand what happened on this land, and is this yarrow for the land? These medicines are medicines for us, they're medicines for animals and winged ones, and they're medicines for the land. So as herbalists, as stewards, we begin observing, wow, this huge thing of hypericum. Yes, maybe I can take some, but when we ask for permission, it's not just about sustainability. We may hear a no because this land has waited for years for these healing plants to show up. So that's what I feel in medicine in place. And so in your farms, in your gardens, find out, I've moved to different places and we do a land clearing, and, the railroad track, we did a permaculture installation with Christine Gouvet, who's a great Charlottesville permaculturist. And we all did readings. We did energetic readings, and and this is the back land where these condos were built, and the condos came and said, hey, will you help us with this land reclamation? And then once we dug in and did the history, our backyard was where the cockfights were held, and it was by the railroad. And so there was all kinds of itinerant energy there. So before we planted anything, it's about clearing that. And so biodynamics changes the energy, even prayer, even granny herbalists that I've seen, they just go out and they, will kind of do this in the South. I've seen them take their spittle and wipe it into the soil and say prayers and sing songs on it. It really doesn't matter. What matters is us engaging with the land as a living being. And so medicine of place is understanding that the pine trees, they are 700 million years old. Maybe we've been here a million years. Like, if we're lucky, I don't even think Aborigines, whether it's Aborigine or Africa, 500,000. So when you imagine the seasons, the seasons and changes, and ginseng is an adaptogen because it survived the ice age. So yes, we have stress, but ginseng is a rooted creature, and it saw the ice age and it had to adapt. And so those steroidal saponins and all of the medicine in those roots, they're not for us. That's because that plant had to change course, had to adapt. And so we can take them, and steroids are steroids, whether they're from a pharmacy or they're from ginseng. In a way, it's a steroidal form, and it has a certain effect on our body. So when we look at, the struggle or where a plant grows, that may seem like a luxury. But, if you go into the mountains here and into White Oak Canyon and all of the valleys, those water-rich herbs that love the streams, the hydrangeas, the jopai, the nettles, they're vibrant. They're really different medicines. So that's wild crafting, and that's a whole other conversation. Should we gather from the wild? But in our gardens, we mimic nature. And so we try as best we can. Well, where does this love to grow? All right, well, I don't have a wetland, but I sure can plant maybe at the bottom of my hill so the water rolls down, and that's a wetter place. So that's permaculture in a way. But I think permaculture is co-opt indigenous farming. And it is. Mollison said that. But, how did they farm in arid Africa? They harvested nature. And so that's all we're doing. And I think permaculture has brought a tremendous amount of wisdom to our world. So again, it's a small group. If I'm prattling too much, or if I'm talking about things that you're not aware of, back me up and say, hey, I don't know what you meant when you said that. Okay. So energetic herbalism. Oh God, I heard this great podcast this morning. And they were talking about Gregory Bateson. I don't know if you've ever heard of Gregory Bateson. But he was saying that the truth is in the patterns, and patterns tell the truth because they're repetitive and they have they can hold form. And that's what we're looking at in energetic herbalism. We're looking at patterns. We're looking at the pattern, too much heat, too much cold. And you're looking at patterns of the land. You all as farmers and growers, you look for the patterns of growth cycles and how you work with that. And so that's what we're looking at. So in the book, I kind of took on the heroic test. The book is actually my 3-year curriculum. And then when I started writing it with my editor, we realized, wow, this should be a manual in everybody's home. So we made it a little less academic, less clinical. And for me, in 30 years, these are the teachers I have had. And what I'm sharing is how I work with a client and sort of my framework of healing. And so the Chinese aspect of it is for me, it's 5 element or 5 phase. Most practitioners do TCM. They don't think much of 5 phase. 5 phase was more shamanic. It's a little more emotional, psychological. But why I love it is it's incredibly intuitive. And so these slides, this is sort of the 17 countries in 10-day tour of some place. So I want you to sit back, kind of enjoy the view. If there's a way I can get you these slides, I'm happy to. I can put them in black and white and send them through an email. But I just want you to sort of get a bird's eye view, not trying to go in. So I'm giving a few more slides. I went through and I even took some out, but just know this is simply introductory, just like a pebble on a pond. We're just going to skip lightly so that you understand what I mean by energetic. So in Chinese medicine, each of the 5 seasons relates to an element. And energetic herbalism is about elemental herbalism. From time immemorial, I don't care if you're Mohawk, Chinese, West African. I had a West African teacher. They work with the elements. This is what's known: earth, air. This is the language of our bodies. It's the language of the plants. And all of them have very different ways of articulating them. Beautiful stories of how to articulate. So in autumn is the metal element. And in autumn, every season has an organ, has a taste, has a color, emotion. You see that whole long list. And what is so invaluable here is this is what governs my teaching. This is how our curriculum goes through the year and goes through the season. And it's also, you begin to watch your body and it's like, oh my God, that's right. That works, at least in our temperate zone. So the metal is lungs and large intestine. And with each of the 5 elements, there's a major emotion that is processed by that organ system. And so in the fall, metal is all about authority, all about breath, all about value, all about being shiny. And so that's what the lungs and large intestine there are, cleansing organs. They work beautifully to bring in a sparkle. They're all about elimination. And so when the fall comes, that's the time to do a lighter fast, not as intense maybe as the springtime, but you don't want to go into the cold, damp winter with phlegm, with inflammation. So in the fall, you clear your lungs and you clear your large intestine and you prepare. You see a lot of allergies. And then I've known many clients who is like, oh, it's October, here's my bronchitis. I've had bronchitis for 20 years. It's just the way life is. I go in for an antibiotic. Nope, nope, nope. That is not your fate. You know, that's a pattern that was set up 20 years ago and wasn't recognized. And you just kind of fell into that pattern because in the fall, our lungs and large intestine are more vulnerable. So why I'm starting with this is in Corona times, it's more, you know, we're concerned about our lungs, and the emotion that is processed in the fall is grief. And so, yes, it is seasonal affective disorder, but there's this melancholy, there's this incredible, beautiful transformation. It's the descent, and it's, you know, that smell of humusy, kind of rotting leaves. It's so rich and vital. And so the emotion grief, as we're going through this time, it's really honoring it. Yesterday or over the weekend, the herb community lost this incredible teacher and mentor, and he was an incredible photographer, Stephen Foster, and it was shocking. It was a very sudden death, and it just rippled through our community, and yet life goes on. And how do we honor that? And I've had 3 recent passings, and so my altar, I have to be reminded, I have to remember I'm grieving someone. So how do we do that? And how do we honor this? And as I say, Martine Prechtel says the Mayans have 101 words for grief. You know, we just have to get on with it. And if in 6 months after my mother died, I'm still weepy, you know, they want me to be on an antidepressant. And it's like, no, this is going to take years. I want to be functional. I don't want to have such a shadow, but this is a profound emotion. And I don't believe our culture honors grief. And so the fall is very important for processing that. Winter, here we are. Don't know if y'all got some snow, but the winter is about the kidney and bladder. And the water emotion, it's water. The emotion is fear. The rest is just, there's so much to all of this. You know, there's times of the day. There's the Chinese medicine clock, and the bladder is 3 to 5, and the kidney is 5 to 7. And so these are energies. They call these officials, but it still is our organ. So this is hibernation. You know, after Thanksgiving, we close the school. You know, we really try to honor living seasonably. Good luck. I'm kind of a Pitta, and I'm a little active. And here we are in the middle of the winter, new PowerPoint. And but shutting down, closing down, trying to have a slower pace, so that our kidneys can restore. And so imagine the fear that we've been processing the last couple of years. I mean, just meeting someone, oh, I can't hug you, and are you in my pod? And I mean, it's every day. All the more reason when you understand the seasons and how they process, you're like, all right, this is adaptogens, this is bone broth. You know, how do I nourish my kidneys right now? And I put this slide in because it's the adrenals, and we hear about adrenal fatigue. In Chinese medicine, kidneys include the adrenal. So here's the adrenal, add above renal kidney, and the adrenal sits on top of the kidney. So all kidney tonics nourish the adrenals. So the mushrooms, the roots, the adaptogens, that's kidney medicine. Nettle seed gamasio. I mean, who's harvested nettle seed? God love you. I did it once. Angel, who works here, does it. I'm like, girl, you got to charge $40 for this jar of nettle seed, because, man, I'm seeing some smiles, and the ones that are smiling, I know they've done it, right? And that's part of what we're trying to work in the co-op is, you know, these local herbs are value. This is a family we're supporting. We're not supporting a corporation. We're supporting a family. So I love paying $20 for nettles leaf. I love paying $20 for lemon balm. It's like, come on, when I harvest a pound of nettle, there's no way I'd charge only $20. I'd charge $100. So, you know, this is the education we need to get out there of the deep value. And we don't want to use less because we want to keep the farmers. But when it's high quality, freshly dried, it's a completely different experience. So here's the spring. This is the wood element. Wood is that growth. Wood is that dandelion growing up through the sidewalk in New York City. Nothing is going to stop it. And so the organ is the liver gallbladder. And the liver is about vision. The liver is about our spiritual soul. It's our life. It's our vision. And the gallbladder is sort of the one that brings it into manifestation. And so the emotion that's processed by this is anger. Anger saves lives. Anger moves us out of danger. Anger is a critical emotion, but it's supposed to move through us and out. And so obviously our culture needs work with this one as well. But what happens with suppressed anger, it's that liver heat rising, and it's that hothead, it's that impatient, angry. And so working with bitters, working with cooling herbs, coming out of the spring, really stimulating the liver, but realizing, oh, it could be a release of heat. Milk thistle, you know, we'll talk about the bitters later on, but just the support of our liver is absolutely essential today. You know, we can't even think about all of the chemicals that we're taking in and the anger. I mean, if I were really living authentically, I'd probably wake up enraged every day. So not going to do it. We can't do that, but there's a lot of that coming. And I think in this time, you know, as we're coming out of one epic and into another, so much is being revealed. And so now it's so much, for better, for worse, but it's really important. We're seeing, and we have to really respond to the call of how do we change the injustices. So anyway, liver, when in doubt, give them milk thistle and take bitters. So here's the summer. This is my backyard. And this whole garden, you know, as gardeners, gardens come and go, but here's golden seal. And then back here is ginseng, and it was a 4-pronged ginseng. And I will say, I probably lost this because I was boasting. I really think that's how I left it. I moved this ginseng with me. I'd forget my son, but I'd bring this ginseng. Like, it was beautiful. I either gave it llama manure, which somebody said was cold and it might have been too hot. But I think sometimes it just taught me humility. But look, these are all the natives. There's Kohash, and I live downtown Charlottesville. So it's a United Plant Savers Botanical Sanctuary, and the whole message here is just plant the plants. If they look a little droopy, move them. This is a birch tree that's there no longer, and it's next door to this walnut. So everybody knows nothing should grow under a walnut, but these were growing. So that's about relationship. So the summer is fire, it's the heart, it's all about heat. And so in Chinese medicine, the flavor is bitter. Bitters are very cooling. And so what we wanted, heat is, we'll see that in the tissue states, heat can be very injurious to the heart. So how do you stay cool? We have refrigerants. We have, we have our mints. Sometimes they're stimulating. You know, look at all the hibiscus, the roselle, the cooling mints, the chamomile. They're just amazing. So when we learn energetics of plants, will realize, oh, this is a summer. Oh, this is why we eat watermelon. Watermelon is one of the most cooling foods on the planet, as is cucumber. So how do we, work towards the foods that are going to help our elements? This is late summer, and this is the spleen and stomach, and the element here is earth. So fall was metal, winter is water, spring is wood, summer is fire, and now we have earth, and earth is all about nourishment. The metal is the father, the authority, the heavenly guidance that we have, and the earth is the mother, the nourisher. This is when you don't want to look at one more squash. You don't want to, harvest that. The harvest is just bountiful and coming in. And that's the earth element. Very, very grounding. So, and then this is when we slowly, it's still raw, and with climate change, it's staying warmer much later. But ideally with the earth, raw foods are hard for the digestive system, and they're fine with heat. But, putting lime juice, putting things on to help break down those raw cell walls is really important. So coming into late summer, traditionally, this is when you begin cooking to help the stomach and spleen accept and digest. So the taste is sweet, and that's our sweet herbs. That's our ginseng, astragalus, marshmallow. All of those are super, super sweet, and they nourish. They're the building herbs. So when you learn flavor, and we'll talk about that, you can taste an herb and not know anything about it, and you can glean an idea of, well, what's this going to do in my body? How will my body relate to it? So there's a chapter on Chinese medicine, medicine of the seasons, and then there's a chapter on Ayurveda medicine, science of life. And so, growing up in Flint Hill, Sperryville, really being bioregional, really, all right, what's our medicine? What's Western medicine? And we came up with constitutions, ectomorph, endomorph, mesomorph. And it just really wasn't developed at all. And then I met a teacher of Ayurveda years ago at Rosemary's Conference, New England, and just fell in love with the Ayurveda lens of these three constitutions. And again, I'm not going to delve into them. This is, intro, but, Vata, thin, creative, their nervous system is what rules the day. So they're inspirational, they're intellectual, and they can be anxious, and they are full of air and ether, or air and space. That's really the elements that govern this constitution. So knowing what your constitution is, I'm the next one, I'm Pitta, and Pitta is predominantly fire and water. And so for me, and that water for Pitta also means oil. So I can get, jealous or angry or impatient. So I really need moistening, cooling, and grounding herbs. And so I know that about myself, and the constitutions are what are called doshas. They're actually our fault. And it's like a tarot, it's your hopes and fear card. And then Kapha is water and earth. And so here are the Western physiology, but they really didn't develop them. And you, wherever you go, it's the same frame, it's the same energetic. But Ayurveda has been teaching this for 5,000 years, and Vasant Lad came over with his mission to really share this medicine so that Westerners could understand our nature. And that's why I totally dig energetic herbalism. It's like, what's your nature? And how do you work with that? How do you bring it to the fore? How do you understand this is your gift? And how do you not get into trouble. So as I said, vata means that which moves things. So in every single human being, vata, everybody has vata. In fact, vata is one of the most important. It's the constitution that gets the bum rap. It's like, oh, they're anxious, they're nervous, they're running around, chasing their tails. They can't stop talking, tons of energy. But everything needs vata. My eyelashes need vata to move. My bowels need vata to move. Movement is so vital. But when there's too much movement, that is very exhausting and it's deleterious to a lot of the different functions. Inhalation, exhalations, very important for that. And what's really interesting is each of these doshas govern a time of life. And so vata tends to be thin, more sinewy, dry. And so vata, to pacify vata, and I think COVID, I'm going to do a presentation on COVID is the vata time, right? Every morning we wake up. What's going to happen? Is there change? Nothing's the same. There really is no pattern. Masks on, masks off. You know, the divisiveness, it's so aggravating. So this is how we pacify, and putting oils on our body and skull cap and lemon balm and really grounding that. So vata time of life is the elder years. We're kind of dry, we need oils, we have insomnia maybe, we're a little more anxious, very creative. We're coming in with our second wind, third wind, and, great visions are born in the elder years. So Pitta means that which transforms. This is fire. This is that transformation. That's that alchemical fire that changes base metals. And so Pitta is primarily digestion. That's our major digestive furnace. In Ayurveda, they say the Agni, the digestive fire, really needs to stay strong. It's also oil is really important in Pitta. So in its normal state, it's heat, vision. Pitta is about the visual perception. It's more muscular. It's sort of in the middle. They can tend to be hot-headed. They can tend to be visionaries, but really understanding that the one element that you really need to go in and treat quickly is fire, because fire is very destructive. Air, that person's just going to spin and they'll probably be fine. They'll fall asleep. Kapha, a lot of earth and water, they just will move slowly. But fire can be destructive. That's inflammation, right? Like, what are we dying of? We're dying of inflammation. What people are leaving with COVID on, that's inflammation, and that's heat. And so when we understand that, it's like, oh, wow, let's cool arthritis. Let's cool certain things. Nobody's talking about here, this is what you do for diabetes. They just talk about comorbidity, but they don't deal with the comorbidity. But that's racism. That's poverty. Comorbidity is that's a whole other conversation. But we need major change, and we need to rethink the medicalization of our culture. And then there's Kapha, which is larger build. This is earth and water. It's colder, wetter, heavy. It's slower. Some people say dull. But Kaphas get a bad rap. Oh, they're large, they're obese, but they're not. I mean, when you take a questionnaire, you might be really surprised that you just don't go by what the body looks like. It's what's your nature. And for me, like Matt Wood is a Kapha. My best friend Moon has Kapha. She's Pitta Kapha, but they are loyal. They are loyal. It doesn't matter what time, doesn't matter what happens. And that's earth. Earth is constant. Water is the origin of life. And so in some ways, Vata needs Kapha. And Kapha needs Vata. And so when you start looking at lifestyle and ways to work with that, let's bring some air in here. Let's bring some fire. This might be too dense. Diabetes is kapha. It's wet. It's, that's why the ulcers, the necrotic, you got to get in and get them walking. I mean, we run our free clinic, and I'm kind of a hard ass, and I'll walk with them, but I'll be like, look, I am not going to give you herbs till you walk a quarter mile a day. And they've got crutches and their walker. And I'm like, you got to walk. What's going to happen if there's a fire? Come on, let's go. And, all the herbs in the world are not going to save, sugar, drops down. Sugar actually covers the nerves. And because they're sedentary, that sugar destroys the nerves. But if you start walking, if you get it moving, you're going to get blood in there and move that. So there's a lot of things to do, but bringing in fire and bringing in movement can help that. So let me just stop there and see if there's any comments, questions. How are we doing on time here? Oh, okay. Any questions at this point?
There's nothing in the chat currently.
Okay. So either you're spellbound or you're, these are a lot more slides, but I am going to go quickly through these. This is sort of kind of why I wrote the book. There aren't many good books on tissue states. And tissue states are our Western traditional energetic language. This is from the eclectics. It is European based, but this is looking at our energetics. And I will use constitutions in my practice, but I don't want to say to my client, oh, you're spleen chi deficient or you're vata dysregulated. I create a hierarchy, right? I want to say, God, there's some stagnation here. Let's get this moving. I want to use language that doesn't create a hierarchy, that my clients or students can understand. Oh, that makes sense. Oh, golly, cayenne, stagnation. Yeah, that I know what that means. So why I love the tissue states, they're a little dense. Matt Wood is really the only one who's written a book on it, and it's awesome. But I just wanted another book with a few more stories and a few more examples because it can get dense. Jim McDonald is an awesome teacher in the tissue states. So, vital energy is chi, it's prana, it's orenda, the Iroquois, it's ashe, it's there's many, many different words for energy. And so originating from Greek medicine, we have vitalism. And that's why I love to use that with clients instead of, oh, your chi is low. Wow, you look really vital today. How's your vitality? People get that. It's even kind of giving them a medicine in a way. So there's a lot of functions. I'm going to kind of skip through these. But vitalism, this all makes sense. This is nothing new. Vitalism warms, dead bodies are cold, they're inactive. And so vitality warms things. It transforms unusable or raw into usable or refined. And so this isn't just food, but it's concepts. So I'm kind of downloading a lot on you. And wow, we went from Chinese to Ayurveda, and now here, this is a lot to digest. And so in my school, we have a bitter bar, and we're constantly taking bitters because bitters help with digestion. They help digest ideas. And so in this ever-changing world, especially if you listen to news, or if you're on social media, that's an awful lot to digest. And so, if you want to choose one activity, help it, facilitate it. I have bitters all around the house. I'll take a hit of bitters. We have drying bitters, cooling bitters, yummy bitters, bitter bitters. Bitters are all about relaxation. They're very cooling. So if you run cold, warm up your bitters. But that's what vitality does. It helps transform many things. It moves stuff. Like your little heart muscle is not what is moving your blood. I don't know how they said this, but I looked it up twice. I had to footnote it authentically in the book. Like your blood vessels circle the earth twice. I don't know how that happens, but like the minuscule, that's a lot of blood vessels. Like it's really important. It's not just the heart. There's vitalism. It's this other force that's propelling. It protects us. Vital, you're tired, you get a cold sore, you get sick. Your Wei Qi, your defensive energy is low. My dear friend of mine got COVID, who I spent a lot of time with. And I work really closely with her. And, so I had one vax, I had a J&J, I'll, transparent here. And I haven't gotten a booster because I just feel, wow, here's evolution. Here's this virus, here we are, how are we going to evolve? And I'm not saying that's for anyone. Like a lot of people I know are boosted, a lot of people I know are not vaxxed. It's your personal decision. But what I did do is I am boosting every day, man. I'm 66, I had Lyme disease. I have inflammation. Some days I'm like, dang, I want to go get a booster. It's like that, whatever it is. But this is such an important time for us to really research and think. So I am on reishi, I'm on vitamin D, 10,000, blah, blah, blah. I'm on all this protocol, but I have to tell you, other than being tired because it's winter, in some ways, I feel better than I have felt in a really long time because, I'm taking mushrooms. I'm making vats and vats of elderberry. And a friend of mine just gave me frozen aronia berry because I think aronia berries are future food, right? Higher in antioxidants than so many other foods, and you mow it down. So I'm taking aronia berry. So, that's my boost. I could wake up tomorrow, y'all, and I'll be like, oh, I'm going to go get a booster. I am not on any kind of a platform. But that protection, it's really understanding. That's the point of this story, is that's immune system. That's vitality, really feeling vital, really feeling strong about that. And it's not that, super healthy people don't get sick. That's not at all true. So real quick, I think this is super cool because plants have directions. And so there are directions of vital energy. So it goes up, thinking, clear, posture, downward, inhalation, defecation, outward. This is diaphoretics. This is elderflower, yarrow. Inward. Inward is consolidating. Mimosa bark. Major inward direction. It's so incredibly centering. Cinnamon, you put it in winter because it brings you inward. It kind of warms your interior. Outward, these are the diaphoretics, sweating to release heat. Yarrow, elderflower, we need to open the pores. We need to vent the heat when the fever is high. So our functions have directions, and plants. Every plant has a direction, and it's just understanding what is that. So these are Matthew's 6 tissue states. Super quickly going to go through them. I love Kiva Roses. I think she has another name. The two of them change their names so often. They change the name of their conference. But I think her writing in her herbalism is stunning. These are not polar spectrums. This is a continuum. And more often than not, you're going to have a couple of tissue states going on at the same time. It's just like you might be Vata Pitta. You can have different doshas. Taste. Taste is the art of herbalism, right? because when you taste it, you can get a really good general idea of, well, what's this herb doing? What's this food doing? And so pungent, spicy, it's moving. Rosemary, thyme, you have a cold. If you're sick, if you're feeling stagnant, if you have a sinus infection and you're at your aunt's in Rochester and there's not a health food store around, go to the spice rack, go get ginger, go get thyme, even old McCormick's, it's been there for 10 years. Make a strong thyme tea, make a rosemary tea. If you bruise it and you can still smell the volatile oils, there's medicine there. So the bitter, you know, it drains, it dries, it can be very cooling. So you have to warm up bitters if you take a lot of them. Sour is very astringing and it prevents leakage. It prevents too much fluid from moving. Sweet is very building and tonifying and very harmonizing. Salty mineral nettles, mullein. I mean, we do tea tastings at our school and it's a blind tasting and they don't know. And it's like, wow, this is, you know, minerals, or they'll say it's sweet. And I'll be like, is it sweet mineral or sweet root, sweet earth? And you become the sommelier of the different intonations of these plants because that's telling you how it's working in your body. And then there is a flavor blend, which it's very neutral, it's very safe, it's for convalescent. So heat excitation, this is autoimmune disease, you know, and this is when you use the cooling, self-heal. I love prunella, I love self-heal. It clears toxic heat. Plantain clears toxic heat. So many of our wonderful weeds are heat clearing herbs. So if you get bit by a snake, and we've had a number of copperhead snake bites to deal with, especially in Nelson County recently, because they're sending people home from the hospital. They don't want to use the anti-venom. So we're using all the heat clearing herbs. And that's what Echinacea. Echinacea, you don't use it for a cold unless you put ginger in. Echinacea is one of the coldest medicines, which is why it's great for a rattlesnake bite, because it's great for heat, clearing heat. So these are cooling. Heat will dry tissue, menopause, you have lots of hot flashes. You got to have oils. You got to really bring in the juicy plants to really nourish the tissue. So you have heat, and then you have cold, and cold is can be hypothyroid, can be just, I'm starting to run cold. Hey, I had mono when I was 20, then I was in a car accident, then I got Epstein-Barr. I'm running colder than normal. You know, so you want to go back in, you want to jump that metabolism. You want to warm that. You don't want to just say, oh, I've been cold ever since. So these are the spices. These are, you know, we make a lot of chai adaptogen teas, just using the great spices. So the dry tissue state, that might be more vata. Dehydration is water as well as oil. Maybe you're not taking in oils, but we have great herbs. We have the demulcents. We can really slather on some cellular membranes. Here we are at Robbie Wooding's herb farm. Every year we go down and he has these slippery elms that are losing branches. He is not cutting trees, but these are branches that he gets off the slippery elm. So we'll teach how to harvest barks and how to harvest like black haw. But as you all know, as growers and wholesalers, it's like, oh my God, a pound of black haw, how the heck can they sell that for $16? That's criminal. You know, we got to be paying $100 a pound. You know, you got to rasp it. You got to get the draw blade. You got to dry it. You got to package it. So that's why we go down. We go down also to drink moonshine and listen to a band and go swimming and see golden seal. And it's a great time. But it's also, here's how you harvest bark. And this is the relationship of the marketer, how to sell that. damp, stagnant. So you have dry and now you have damp. And this is where you get into a lot of trouble. This is like diabetes, sometimes hypothyroid. This is kind of hard to clear, but this is our blood cleansers. You know, this is that toxic metabolic syndrome, right? Metabolic syndrome. So all of our great digestives, all of relieving the damp and draining the damp. But the other thing that's amazing here is this is draining damp and stagnant. That's alteratives. That's blood cleansers. That's your dandelion, burdock, red clover. It changes. It just changes the environment. So when we do those on a daily basis, you know, I always change out. I'm focusing on my heart now with gotu kola and hawthorn leaf and flower, but I change up my tea and I'll change it to the season. And also my particular things that I really want to focus on. But what was the point of that? Oh, I always have an alternative in there. Here's tension. We don't know anything about tension. Stress, pain, tension. I love lobelia. You know, I've taught whole classes on lobelia. Don't be afraid of it. If you take too much, you're just going to puke. I mean, I can't even tell you how ridiculous it is that people have said people died of lobelia. You know, you can't, you know, unless you take the wrong plant. I don't know what I would have done with asthmatic children. I lived outside of Front Royal. That was a super fun EPA site, asthma off the chart. There's no way I could have gotten children off inhalers without lobelia. So low dose. It's a fabulous herb. It kind of prefers vinegar. If you're going to tincture it, it doesn't have the long shelf life. And here's our last tissue state. We're almost getting there. This is lax or relaxation. So you have tension or wind, and that, you know, you can be calm and chill, but you can still have tension in your body. So the tissue state was called relaxation. Jim McDonald renamed it lax because relaxation is a desirable state. This is when the tissues are too lax and they don't have the integrity to hold on to things. That's the sagging of aging. It's like gravity's kind of taking over as lax. You know, sometimes the bladder, you know, the loosening of the sphincter, lax tissue states in PMS or uterine. You know, look at all the uterine tonics. They're astringent. You know, they're going in and they're treating the laxity of that muscle so that you can contract, you can have really good, strong contractions. So vital energy is not strong enough to hold things in. This does happen as we age. Here's my favorite. I mean, look at the doctrine of signatures. The doctrine of signatures says the plant looks like what it does. Now, if that doesn't say, I'm going to hold you up, baby, you know, that's such a beautiful medicine. And we have that. And if you all know about Schizandra, we can grow Schizandra. It's really easy to grow, in fact. But I think sumac is sort of our American Schizandra. Schizandra is very tightening as well. But I love sumac. So this is Frank Herbert. I don't know if you've seen Dune. It just came back out. Stunning movie. The spice. It's all about the spice. And, you know, Frank, as a writer of future science fiction, he said, you know, we don't write about the future to predict it. We write about the future to prevent it. And I think that's so powerful because when we see these dystopian images and we see what's happening today, it should really alert us. It's like, oh, we could take that path or we can choose another path. And so he's a brilliant writer. And I love that he says the mystery of life isn't a problem to solve, but a reality to experience. And so that's what I love about energetic herbalism. It's sensual. It's that experience. It's, what's it taste like? What's it feel like? What's it doing in my body? And, being mindful when you take your tinctures, and, thinking about, wow, what does this feel like? What does this bitter really do in my body? So I just love the experiential nature of that. And then here's an unashamed little push there, and then back to what brought us all together. Again, so many thanks to all y'all out there in herb craft. And so can you say one more time, Lacey, what the craft stands for? And again, for I still may not get the title of my book right. They name the book and they pick the cover. So I'm really lucky that they picked a great cover, but the name was so long, I still struggle with it. But can you remind us what craft stands for?
Chesapeake Region Association of Apothecaries, Farms, Trailblazers.
Yes. That's so great. So yeah, Gathered Threads and Tonic. I'm just going to say, oh, they're graduates. I love them. And Sacred Roots, to all of these folks. I just look so forward. Strobe and Tooth of all of this is just so fabulous. And there's many more that may not have gotten the logo up, but hopefully you'll be seeing more about that. So why don't I stop the share, and then we'll all come back and just see if there's any questions. And I'm fine if it's a small group. If you want to raise your hand, I think there is a button down there that says, oh no, this one doesn't have it. Sometimes there's a raise a hand, but whatever y'all are comfortable with.
We did have one question in the chat from earlier when we were discussing doshas. So let me see. So she provided an example. If you're Pitta Kapha, but Pitta traits are positive and Kapha traits are dominant because they're out of balance, should you do things to nurture a Pitta or Kapha?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Alex?
Sorry, yeah, that was a tongue twister. But okay, the original question, let me see, like, are the doshas your strengths or weaknesses? And I guess figuring out how to nourish your body if you're having, I guess, do you, so there's a Kapha.
Maybe I can word it.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I always get tripped up with the doshas because I get confused as to whether or not you want to take things based off of what's out of balance or what your dominant nature is or should be. For example, so if I'm Pitta Kapha and I'm naturally Pitta, my Kapha is way out of balance. Should I be taking things to support my Pitta, which is my natural?
Right. Great question.
Yeah.
Great question. This is why it's a lifetime experience. And I did see the comment that this was a huge download. I think that was Ginger. It's a ton to take in. And I just really want to acknowledge that. And I didn't want it over your head. I just wanted kind of drop dosing of little micro doses of certain topics. So great question. And, as Alex said, the ideal, there's anything that's man-made always comes up with an ideal, right? Nature just sort of allows for all forms to morph. The ideal is all three. All three energies are equally present. You have air, you have fire, you have earth. And that does happen, and it's very rare. more than not, you'll have 2 doshas. There's actually 7. There's Vata, Pitta, Kapha, Vata, Pitta, Vata, Kapha, like that whole kind of configuration. There's actually 7 doshas. So a lot of it is based, Cindy, on your comfort level, on how you're feeling. And if your Kapha is, as you say, out of balance, if that's being aggravated, then you would look at the water, you would look at the earth, you would probably see, how can I get more movement? What are the herbs that are moving? Do I need more spicing? Do I need more pungent? Because too much kapha can be too heavy, too dense, too solid. And so you would have moving herbs, but as a pitta, you would just kind of play around with, well, what herbs aren't going to make me too hot? Ashwagandha, every time I read about ashwagandha, I'm like, oh my God, I want to take a bath in it. It's too heating for me. It's a heating adaptogen. It just doesn't work as much as I wanted to. So that's why, all through the book, I'm like, I only have 25 herbs. And Suevo Brooks is a great teacher of mine. He said, it is better to learn 40 uses of one herb than 40 herbs in one use. So start with a really small apothecary and start to find the ones that, oh my God, skullcap, duh, it's sort of my go-to herb. I can't get it to grow. I don't know. I must have something to work out because it's a mint. I get little bits, but, start with a small repertoire and find out which herbs really have their greatest impact. And so what spices? It's like, oh, well, pungent. Maybe I stay away from them. Maybe I think I don't like them. Does that make sense to you? So the thing is, we have our doshas, and yes, they're our nature. And we're always trying to balance them. And also they are our gift, but our gift can come on too strong. And so it's called prakruti, and our prakruti is formed the moment right before conception. And so it is genetics, but it's also such a whole other spiritual state. And what I love about Ayurveda is they say the goal of life is not enlightenment. It's to balance our doshas. So it's sort of like our karma. It's like, well, how do I get used to this? How do I love this? How do I had a student who was very kapha, and she was like, I dig my kapha. My man loves my kapha. I am the kapha queen. And it's not an imbalance to me, but she talked about how she works with herbs, how she keeps it in balance. So we have to be careful of our Western projection of body type, but it's how do I feel? And it's also sort of my proclivities. Like why I'm working on my heart is my heart was speeding up a little bit. And it's like, that's heat, and it came right after the book. I wrote the book in 7 months, and it was birthing a baby. It wasn't, my home birth was ecstatic. I mean, everybody said, oh, you just birthed it. And somebody today said, oh, I think you died. It was a death for you. You're so Scorpio. It was like, it was a lot in such a short time, but I wasn't tending my heat. I wasn't hydrating. I wasn't nourishing. So I set myself up. Does that make sense? So last thing I want to say on doshas, you have your main dosha, but say I'm kapha and I run cold and slow, but I have a red hot infection. I'm going to put cooling, clearing herbs. You treat the acute. My students are always like, oh, we got to get to the root of it. And I'm like, forget it. You're going to drudge up too many lives here. Like, yes, you do want to get to the root of the illness, but people want to be pain-free. Like if somebody comes in with a headache, my students sometimes want to go down to the, dark dungeons of their soul. It's like, no, let's just get them to sleep. Let's get them walking. It's okay to treat symptomatically. It really is, because that's the most available. That's what's presenting itself. But then you're like, oh, but you're Pitta, so you might want to stay away from this. And you teach people, well, what is your nature? And it's a beautiful understanding, and it can get confusing. Well, do I pacify it? Do I bring it on? You just kind of say, well, what's bothering me? What do I want to change? Kapha is metabolism, and that's why sometimes with a low metabolism, it's that way. Well, adaptogens can speed up metabolism. That's why bitters and digestive herbs, you eat with them because they keep your fire going, your digestive fire. Okay. I'm sorry, Ginger. Do you have any bitters at home? If this is a little overwhelming. All right. So anything else?
I have a question.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Linda from Southeastern.
Hi, Linda. And where are you from?
Southeastern PA, about an hour north of Philly.
Oh, where?
Doylestown.
I grew up in Norristown.
Oh, okay, yeah, so close.
Yeah. It's so pretty out there.
Yeah, it's nice. So it's not necessarily specifically about what you were talking about. I teach classes here, just very introductory classes at my farm, and I use books. I have recommended texts that I refer them to, and I've used Cheryl Tilgner's book. I've used Maria Norell Grove's book. And I really, really love your energetic approach, and it's not so much covered in the other books that I've used. So if I was recommending that they wanted to purchase it, would they want to go directly through you or your website, or would I direct them to their local bookstore? What would be the best way?
Yeah, I say local bookstore first. And if it's not there, they can call the bookstore. I do have a social media moment. They ran a second printing 3 weeks after it came out, which is pretty exciting. But I think that's great. And then if you call local libraries, because I've done that here for people that don't want to buy it, or so I'd start there. If they want a signed copy, they can get it through my website, and I'm happy to sign it. And there's a whole thing there. Okay. But yeah, and then there's a lot of independent booksellers. And I did see it on Thrift Books. I don't know how this happens. I'm new to this world. There's already used books for sale. So, by the time you have shipping, it might come out to the usual price. But that's a great question, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for talking to us tonight.
Yeah, and even though it is kind of intense, my hope is the book, you're going to return to it over and over. And the plants are the colonizer plants. It's the plantain, it's the motherwort, it's the yarrow, it's mostly the European herbs that are not endangered. And so when I was writing the book, I had to think about Pacific Northwest and the Southwest and Florida and what herbs are there. And most of these herbs you can grow in a lot of different bioregions. And I work with Unhoused at the clinic here, and we've gone on plant walks with them. And I'm telling you, they work with chickweed. They get lots of severe infections, and chickweed really clears a nasty, gnarly infections. So there were a couple of different audiences in mind for picking the 25 herbs. But thank you. So what's the name of your farm?
Barefoot Botanicals.
Oh, that was your, that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Awesome. I think intro classes are what's going to change the world. I
Yeah,
think
it's just about connection, just connecting them. It's like so
that's
simple.
where the revolution begins,
Yeah.
without a doubt. So thank you.
Hey, Kat, I have a question.
Sure.
So for a lot of my folks that are in the CSA or come to Foxhaven for classes and I introduce energetics, there's a lot of questions about how to figure out where your base energetics are,
Sure.
or kind of like how to start figuring out your constitution. Because I feel like a lot of folks come to herbalism, like often a lot of us come with like chronic issues that we're kind of trying to work through, right? And so like we're into these patterns for a long time and we're having a hard
Right.
time kind of like being like what's in there like what's at the
Sure.
bottom of that. And I know you said like don't go down into the cellar, but like do you have some tips for where to start looking for like what your constitution is?
Sure, that's a great question. So there's a lot of, I didn't put a questionnaire in my book. I don't know. I was going back and forth. There's a lot of good questionnaires. Deepak Chopra's website has one. Banyan Botanicals has one. If you want, I'm happy to email this group. My teacher's questionnaire, and it gives you patterns. You add up the numbers and it talks about how you sleep, how you digest, how you do everything essentially. And then you begin to see, well, I have more in Vata Kapha. And then you begin watching, what your responses are. So I think the questionnaire is a really good place to start. In tissue states, it's just reading each tissue state and starting very simply and realizing that, autoimmune, this is heat excitation. Let's use the rose family. Roses are cooling. And so it's the pattern of the energy. And then every pattern of energy has sort of a family pattern. The rose family do very similar things. Roots are often sweet and building. So I think if you start with that constitution, I'm not saying this is the only way. There are many, many other models. But because this is so available online, and I think a lot of people are on there, it's free. And, they're pretty standard. So once you begin to understand that nature, then you start looking at the symptoms. So you sort of have your big picture. Well, these are my tendencies. This is my nature. But working with somebody that you can go back, and so many times it's mono or pneumonia as a 2-year-old. I've gone back and I've treated childhood diseases and it'll change the pattern. So, a lot of times, I'm sorry, a lot of times it'll, when you hear the word, I've never been the same since, they probably haven't. And when I hear I've never been the same since, I give them a Eleutherococcus, because they're tired. They've never been the same since. And they've sort of been working, not on a deficiency, but something hasn't been right. Does that make sense? And so I think we're using too many adaptogens. It's like your check engine lights on and you're like, oh, I'll give it more oil, or oh, I'll give it more gasoline, but we're just going to blow the engine. So when we're fatigued and tired, and I'm preaching to my choir, the only thing that's really going to deeply nourish is a rest. Mental retreats, retreating from the world, retreat and rest and not ask our bodies to process anything. And also the bone broths and the sweet, nourishing roots, the burdock. I mean, I'm telling you, if we had 5 herbs, burdoc's got to be one of them. You can live off burdock. It's so incredibly balancing and nourishing and building and nutritive and digging. It goes deep. I mean, burdock, if you want to work on a chronic issue, I mean, look, you've all probably dug. If you haven't dug burdock, it goes 2 feet down. And that's medicine of place. It has the ability to burrow 2 feet. Mostly it's an earth healer. It goes into clay soil that's been disrupted. So that's a long answer to your question, but I think the constitutions kind of give you a picture of, well, what, and then reading about certain foods. You know, certain foods really help these constitutions. And you might find, oh my gosh, I've been eating this food forever. And you know what? I'm going to stop it for a while. And you find you feel better. I mean, the elimination diet, it takes so much discipline. But if you just take dairy out for a month, you know, if you read your constitution and it just was very, very helpful to kind of see the patterns of foods that are very helpful. But symptoms are also a really valid place to start. You know, I keep getting UTIs. I keep getting cold sores. You know, you can nourish and build and treat that. And then at the same time, you know, you're working on your constitution. Well, it is 8:32. I'm happy to hang out, but anything else before we close?
All the thank yous are flooding in. So I'll say thank you aloud to you for sharing everything, your wealth of knowledge, and it really shows. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. So I can't wait to come to the farm. Oh, thank you all. All right. So I usually end with a song. Plants love, love, love songs. And I won't do a round. And if you have to hop off, that's fine. I wasn't planning on this. But I just want to do a very, very short song taught to me by Emily Ruff and Rosemary Gladstar. And I'm going to make it go a little faster just because it's the end of the night and I have to stand when I sing. And this is all about the elements. This is why I want to share it. And sing to your plants. Plants are all about songs. They miss our songs, you know, singing and working, and, you know, they miss that. Okay. When I was young, it's usually a call and response, but we won't do that. When I was young, I was the sun, shone through the trees onto the earth. When I was young, I was the mountain, held all the birds, knew my own vision. When I was young, I was the river, flow through the mountain into the sea. When I was young, I was the ocean, held all my friends until the end. I am, I am, I am, I am. We are, we are, we are, we are. We are so grateful for the plants that bring us together. So thank you all, Alex, Lacey, for hosting. And yeah, I guess I'll see you in the spring somewhere at the farm, but thank you very much. So I'll be in touch with Lacey to figure out how to get slides. I don't know if that's an option, or a questionnaire, the dosha questionnaire.
That's perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Oh, an album of plant music. That's awesome. All right. Thanks, y'all.
Good night.
Good night. Lacey, do you want to tell me now and maybe I can send the slides tomorrow?
Sure. Yeah.
Should I do it in a black and white format? You know how you can do 6 slides to a page?
Yeah. That should work fine. Yeah. Or
I can WeTransfer, but
yeah.
I don't know how you would get that out to the crowd.
Yeah, I was thinking I could put it on our drive and then just give folks a link to view from our drive that way. Like if you want to send me the PDF of the slides, like just in its normal form, I think I could probably upload it to our drive, and that way it's not like this huge file that I'm sending, but I don't know how you'll send it to me. I'm not sure.
Well, I'll probably send it in WeTransfer, and when you download it, it'll be the PDF.
Okay, great. That sounds
good. Yes,
good.
I can go in and convert the PowerPoint to PDF.
Okay.
And that's what I'll do. And then I'll send that PDF to you.
Okay, great. And if you want to send the questionnaire too, then I'll send that to everybody. Perfect. That's great. Well, I hope you got some change for seeds or something. Thank you. Yeah. Good. All right, Lacey. Thank you. Have a good night. Thank you. Okay. You too.